The morning sun was just coming up over the small mountain village of Jiaoshan when Mrs. Chen walked down the dirt road to the school. She carried a small bag with her lunch and some books for teaching. Her shoes were old and had holes in them, but she walked with pride. She had been teaching at the village school for 15 years. Mrs. Chen was 45 years old. Her hair was starting to turn gray, and her hands were rough from hard work. She lived in a small house with her husband and 2 children. Money was always tight in their family. Her husband worked on a small farm, but the land was not good. They grew just enough rice and vegetables to eat. Sometimes there was not enough food for everyone. The school building was old and made of brick. The roof had holes that let rain come in during storms. There were only 3 classrooms for all the children in the village. Mrs. Chen taught the youngest children, from 6 to 10 years old. She loved her job, even though she did not earn much money. Every morning, Mrs. Chen would arrive at school early. She would clean the classroom and get ready for her students. The children would start coming around 8 o'clock. They would run and play in the small yard before school started. Most of them were happy and full of energy. But there was one boy who was different. His name was Liu Wei, and he was 8 years old. Every morning, Liu Wei would sit outside the classroom door. He never played with the other children. He never smiled or laughed. He just sat there, looking tired and sad. Mrs. Chen noticed Liu Wei on his first day at school. He was very thin, and his clothes were too big for him. The clothes were old and had patches on them. His hair was messy, and he looked like he had not eaten in days. When Mrs. Chen tried to talk to him, he would just look down at the ground. The other children told Mrs. Chen about Liu Wei's story. His parents had died in a car accident when he was 5 years old. After that, he lived with his grandmother in a small house at the end of the village. His grandmother was very old and sick. She could not work or take care of him properly. They had no money and no family to help them. Last year, Liu Wei's grandmother had died too. Now, the 8-year-old boy lived alone in the small house. The neighbors felt sorry for him, but they were poor too. Sometimes they would give him some rice or old clothes, but it was not enough. Liu Wei was slowly starving. Mrs. Chen watched Liu Wei every day. She saw how he would try to pay attention in class, but he was too weak and hungry. Sometimes he would fall asleep at his desk. Other times, he could not think clearly because his stomach was empty. When the other children ate their lunch, Liu Wei would just sit and watch them. One day, Mrs. Chen saw Liu Wei outside the school, looking through the trash for something to eat. Her heart broke when she saw this. That night, she could not sleep. She kept thinking about the hungry boy. She knew she had to do something to help him. The next morning, Mrs. Chen made an extra lunch. She put some rice, vegetables, and a piece of chicken in a small container. When she got to school, she quietly put the food on Liu Wei's desk. She did not say anything about it. She just acted like it was normal. When Liu Wei saw the food, his eyes opened wide. He looked around to see who had put it there. Mrs. Chen was writing on the blackboard and pretended not to notice. Liu Wei ate the food very quickly, like he was afraid someone would take it away. It was the first real meal he had eaten in weeks. From that day on, Mrs. Chen brought extra food for Liu Wei every single day. She would get up early in the morning to cook more rice and vegetables. Sometimes she would give him her own food when there was not enough. Her family did not know what she was doing. Mrs. Chen also started to pay special attention to Liu Wei in class. She noticed that even though he was hungry and tired, he was very smart. He could solve math problems that were too hard for other children his age. He could read better than most of his classmates, but he was too shy and scared to speak up in class. After a few weeks of eating regular meals, Liu Wei started to look better. His face was not so thin, and he had more energy. He began to pay attention in class, and even raised his hand to answer questions sometimes. Mrs. Chen was happy to see these changes. One afternoon, Mrs. Chen asked Liu Wei to stay after school. She wanted to help him with his reading. Liu Wei was afraid at first. He thought he was in trouble, but Mrs. Chen spoke to him in a kind voice. "Liu Wei," she said, "you are a very smart boy. I want to help you learn more. Would you like that? Li Wei nodded his head. He was still too shy to speak much, but Mrs. Chen could see that he wanted to learn. From that day on, Li Wei stayed after school for extra lessons. Mrs. Chen taught him math, reading, and writing. She used her own books and paper because the school did not have enough supplies. During these lessons, Liu Wei slowly began to trust Mrs. Chen. He started to talk more and ask questions. Mrs. Chen learned that Liu Wei loved to read and was very curious about the world outside the village. He asked her about cities and schools and what life was like in other places. Mrs. Chen's husband began to notice that she was coming home late from school. He also saw that their food was running out faster than usual. One evening, he asked her about it. "Why are you always late?" he asked. "And why do we not have enough rice this week?" Mrs. Chen did not want to lie to her husband, but she also did not want him to stop her from helping Liu Wei. She told him that she was giving extra help to a student who needed it. She did not tell him about the food. Her husband was not happy. "We barely have enough money for our own children," he said. "You cannot take care of everyone in the village." But Mrs. Chen had made up her mind. She would continue to help Liu Wei, no matter what. She could see that the boy had great potential. With some help and care, he could have a better life. She believed that education was the only way for him to escape poverty. As the weeks went by, Liu Wei continued to improve. He was no longer the sad, hungry boy who sat outside the classroom. He participated in lessons, helped other students, and even smiled sometimes. Mrs. Chen felt proud when she saw how much he had grown, but she also worried about his future. The village school only went up to grade 5. After that, children had to go to the bigger school in the town, which was far away and cost money. Most village children stopped going to school after grade 5 because their families could not afford it. Mrs. Chen knew that Liu Wei was too smart to stop learning. She started to think about how she could help him continue his education, but that would require more money than she had. It would require a big sacrifice. Little did she know that this decision would change both of their lives forever. Winter was coming to the mountain village. The air was getting cold, and the trees were losing their leaves. Mrs. Chen looked at Liu Wei and worried. His clothes were still too thin for the cold weather. She knew that winter would be very hard. For the boy who lived alone, Mrs. Chen's husband had started to ask more questions about their food and money. He noticed that their rice jar was always empty too quickly. He saw that Mrs. Chen was cooking larger meals than usual. One evening, he followed her to school and saw her giving food to Liu Wei. That night, there was a big argument in Mrs. Chen's house. Her husband was very angry. He slammed his hand on the table and raised his voice. "We cannot afford to feed another child," he shouted. "Our own children sometimes go to bed hungry. Why are you giving our food to this boy?" Mrs. Chen tried to explain. "He has no one else," she said quietly. "If we do not help him, he will die." "That is not our problem," her husband replied. "His family should take care of him. We have our own family to worry about." Mrs. Chen's 2 children, a son and daughter, listened to their parents argue. They were confused. They had seen their mother working harder and coming home tired every day. They did not understand why she was helping a boy they barely knew. "But he is very smart," Mrs. Chen said. "If he gets a good education, he can have a better life. Maybe he can even help other people someday." Her husband shook his head. "You are dreaming," he said. "Poor children stay poor. That is how the world works. You cannot change it by giving away our food." The argument went on for hours. Finally, Mrs. Chen's husband gave her an ultimatum. "You must choose," he said. "Stop helping this boy, or I will not give you any more money for food." Mrs. Chen did not sleep that night. She lay in bed thinking about Liu Wei. She thought about how thin and sad he had been when she first saw him. She thought about how much he had learned in just a few months. She thought about his bright eyes when he solved a difficult math problem. The next morning, Mrs. Chen made her decision. She would continue to help Liu Wei, even if it meant fighting with her husband. She knew it was the right thing to do, but helping Liu Wei became harder as winter approached. Food was more expensive in the cold months. The family's small farm did not produce any crops in winter. Mrs. Chen's husband gave her less money for groceries because he was angry about her helping. Liu Wei, Mrs. Chen started to eat less food herself so that she could give more to Liu Wei. She became thinner, and her face looked tired, but she never complained. When Liu Wei thanked her for the food, she would just smile and tell him to study hard. One day in December, it snowed heavily. The village was covered in white, and the air was freezing cold. Mrs. Chen saw Liu Wei shivering in his thin clothes. His lips were blue, and his hands were shaking. She knew that he might get sick if he did not have warm clothes soon. That evening, Mrs. Chen went to her bedroom and opened an old wooden box. Inside the box was her most precious possession, a jade bracelet that had belonged to her mother. Her mother had given it to her before she died, telling her to keep it safe and only sell it if the family was in great trouble. The bracelet was beautiful and valuable. It was made of green jade with small gold flowers carved into it. Mrs. Chen had worn it on her wedding day and kept it carefully wrapped in silk cloth ever since. She had planned to give it to her daughter someday. Mrs. Chen held the bracelet in her hands and made a difficult decision. She would sell it to buy warm clothes and food for Liu Wei. She knew her husband would be very angry if he found out, but she could not watch the boy freeze in the cold winter. The next day, Mrs. Chen took the bracelet to the town market. She found a jewelry shop and asked the owner how much he would pay for it. The owner looked at the bracelet carefully with a magnifying glass. "This is good jade," he said. "I can give you 800 yuans for it." Mrs. Chen's heart sank. 800 yuan was not a lot of money, but it was all she could get. She needed the money for Liu Wei, so she agreed to sell the bracelet. As she walked away from the shop, she felt sad about losing her mother's gift, but she also felt good about helping Liu Wei. With the money from the bracelet, Mrs. Chen bought Liu Wei a warm winter coat, thick pants, warm shoes, and a hat. She also bought rice, vegetables, and meat to make sure he had enough food for the winter months. She gave these things to Liu Wei quietly, without telling him how she got the money. Liu Wei was amazed by the warm clothes. He had never owned anything so nice. "Thank you, Teacher Chen," he said with tears in his eyes. "I will never forget your kindness." As winter continued, Mrs. Chen kept bringing food to Liu Wei every day. But she also noticed something else about the boy. He was incredibly good at mathematics. He could solve problems that even older children found difficult. He could add, subtract, multiply, and divide large numbers in his head. Mrs. Chen realized that Liu Wei had a special gift for learning. She decided to teach him more advanced subjects after school. She borrowed high school math books from other teachers and taught Liu Wei algebra and geometry. She was amazed at how quickly he learned new concepts. One day, Liu Wei asked Mrs. Chen a question that surprised her. "Teacher Chen," he said, "what is life like outside our village? Are there big schools in the cities?" Mrs. Chen told him about universities and colleges in big cities. She told him about students who studied science, medicine, and engineering. She told him about people who became doctors, teachers, and business leaders. Liu Wei listened with wonder. "Do you think someone like me could ever go to a big school?" he asked. Mrs. Chen looked at the boy and saw his potential. "Liu Wei," she said, "you are smarter than most children I have ever taught. With hard work and education, you could do anything you want in life." That night, Mrs. Chen had an idea. She knew that there were good schools in the provincial capital, about 200 kilometers away from their village. Some of these schools gave scholarships to smart children from poor families. Maybe Liu Wei could get a scholarship and continue his education. Mrs. Chen spent weeks writing letters to different schools. She described Liu Wei's abilities and his difficult situation. She asked if any school would consider giving him a scholarship. She mailed the letters and waited for responses. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chen's husband discovered that she had sold her mother's bracelet. He found the empty box and confronted her about it. This led to their biggest fight ever. "You sold your mother's bracelet for that boy?" he yelled. "Have you lost your mind? That bracelet was worth more than we earned in 6 months. Mrs. Chen stood her ground. "I used it to save a child's life," she said. My mother would have understood. She was a kind woman who helped others. Her husband was so angry that he threatened to leave her. If you care more about that boy than your own family, maybe I should find a new wife, he said. This threat scared Mrs. Chen, but she did not change her mind. She believed that helping Liu Wei was the right thing to do, even if it caused problems in her marriage. In February, Mrs. Chen received a letter that changed everything. It was from Minghua Middle School in the provincial capital. The letter said that they were impressed by Liu Wei's story and test scores. They wanted to offer him a full scholarship to attend their school. Mrs. Chen was so excited that she ran to find Liu Wei. She found him studying under a tree near the school, even though it was cold outside. Liu Wei, she said breathlessly, I have wonderful news. A good school in the city wants to give you a scholarship. You can continue your education and become anything you want to be. Liu Wei could not believe what he was hearing. He had dreamed of going to a big school, but he never thought it would really happen. But Teacher Chen, he said, how can I leave the village? How can I leave you? You are the only family I have. Mrs. Chen knelt down so she was at the same height as Liu Wei. She put her hands on his shoulders and looked into his eyes. Liu Wei, she said, this is your chance to have a better life. You must take it. I will always be here in the village, and I will always remember you. But you must go and learn and grow. That is how you can honor the help I have given you. Liu Wei nodded, but tears were flowing down his face. He hugged Mrs. Chen tightly and promised that he would study hard and make her proud. As spring arrived, Mrs. Chen began to prepare Liu Wei for his new life in the city. She knew that this would be the hardest goodbye of her life, but she also knew it was the greatest gift she could give him. Spring came early to the mountain village that year. The snow melted and small flowers began to bloom on the hillsides. But for Mrs. Chen, this spring felt different. It was the spring when Liu Wei would leave for the city school. Every day that passed brought them closer to the moment of goodbye. Mrs. Chen spent weeks preparing Liu Wei for his new life. She knew that the city would be very different from their small village. She tried to teach him about things he had never seen. Before, tall buildings, buses, traffic lights, and hundreds of people walking on busy streets. In the city, you must be careful when crossing roads, she told him. There are many cars, and they move very fast. Always look both ways before you cross. Liu Wei listened carefully to everything Mrs. Chen said. He was excited about going to the city school, but he was also scared. He had never been away from the village before. Everything he knew was here: the mountains, the rice fields, the small houses, and most importantly, Mrs. Chen. The school in the city had sent a letter with instructions for Liu Wei's arrival. He would live in a dormitory with other students. The school would provide his meals, books, and school uniforms. All he needed to bring was some personal clothes and basic items. But Liu Wei did not have much to bring. His clothes were old and patched. He had no suitcase or bag to carry his things. When Mrs. Chen realized this, she went to her husband's closet and took out an old leather suitcase. It was brown and had scratches on it, but it was still strong and useful. Her husband saw her taking the suitcase. Now, you are giving away my things too? He asked angrily. It is just an old suitcase, Mrs. Chen replied. You never use it. The boy needs something to carry his clothes. Her husband shook his head, but did not try to stop her. Over the months, he had seen how determined his wife was to help Liu Wei. He still did not understand her actions, but he had stopped fighting with her about it. Mrs. Chen cleaned the suitcase and packed it with Liu Wei's few belongings. She put in his winter clothes, some notebooks, pencils, and a small photo of his grandmother. She also added some of her own things: a warm scarf, a small blanket, and a bar of soap. The most important thing Mrs. Chen packed was a letter she had written to Liu Wei. In the letter, she wrote about her hopes for his future and reminded him to work hard and be kind to others. She sealed the letter in an envelope and told Liu Wei not to open it until he felt homesick or sad. 2 days before Liu Wei was supposed to leave, Mrs. Chen did something that surprised everyone in the village. She organized a small farewell party for him. She invited all the children from her class and some of the village families. The party was held in the school classroom. Mrs. Chen had bought some candies and cookies with her own money. The children sang songs and played games. Liu Wei smiled more that day than he had in years. For a few hours, he forgot about his worries and just enjoyed being a child. During the party, some of the village adults came to say goodbye to Liu Wei. Many of them had watched him grow up as an orphan. They were proud that he was getting a chance to go to a good school. "Study hard, boy," said Mr. Wang, who owned the village store. "Make our village proud. Remember where you come from," said Mrs. Li, who sometimes gave Liu Wei vegetables from her garden. "But do not let the past hold you back." Liu Wei thanked everyone for their kind words. He promised that he would work hard and not waste the opportunity he had been given. The night before Liu Wei was supposed to leave, Mrs. Chen could not sleep. She kept thinking about the 8-year-old boy she had first seen sitting outside her classroom, hungry and alone. Now, he was 12 years old and ready to start a new life in the city. She felt proud of how much he had grown, but she also felt sad about losing him. Mrs. Chen got up early on the morning of Liu Wei's departure. She made a special breakfast for him, rice porridge with eggs and vegetables. She also packed some food for his journey to the city. The bus ride would take several hours, and she wanted to make sure he did not get hungry. When Liu Wei arrived at school that morning, Mrs. Chen was waiting for him with the suitcase and the food. Liu Wei was wearing his best clothes, the warm clothes Mrs. Chen had bought him with the money from her mother's bracelet. He looked nervous but excited. "Are you ready for your big adventure?" Mrs. Chen asked with a smile. Liu Wei nodded, but she could see that he was trying not to cry. "I am ready, Teacher Chen, but I will miss you very much." Mrs. Chen took Liu Wei's hand, and they walked together to the bus stop at the edge of the village. The bus stop was just a simple wooden bench beside the main road. They sat down and waited for the bus to arrive. While they waited, Mrs. Chen gave Liu Wei some final advice. "Remember to eat 3 meals every day," she said. "Do not skip meals even if you are busy studying. And remember to write letters to me. I want to know how you are doing." "I will write to you every week," Liu Wei promised. "I will tell you about everything I learn." Mrs. Chen reached into her pocket and pulled out a small cloth bag. Inside the bag was some money, not much, but all she had been able to save. "This is for emergencies," she said. "If you ever need anything, use this money, but try to save it if you can." Liu Wei looked at the money and shook his head. "Teacher Chen, you have already given me so much. I cannot take your money too." "You must take it," Mrs. Chen insisted. "I will worry about you if you do not have any money. Please, take it for my peace of mind." Liu Wei accepted the money with tears in his eyes. He had learned not to argue with Mrs. Chen when she was determined to help him. In the distance, they could hear the sound of the bus engine. The bus appeared around the bend in the road, moving slowly and making loud noises. It was an old bus with faded paint and cracked windows, but it would take Liu Wei to his new life. The bus stopped with the screech of brakes. The door opened, and the driver looked at Mrs. Chen and Liu Wei. "Is this the boy going to the provincial capital?" the driver asked. "Yes," Mrs. Chen replied. "Please take good care of him. He is traveling alone." The driver nodded. He had transported many children from mountain villages to city schools. He understood how important this journey was. Mrs. Chen helped Liu Wei put his suitcase on the bus. Then she hugged him tightly. Liu Wei began to cry, and Mrs. Chen felt her own tears starting to fall. "Do not cry," she whispered to him. "This is a happy day. You are going to learn wonderful things and meet new people. You are going to have a better life than anyone in our village has ever had." Liu Wei wiped his tears and looked at Mrs. Chen. "Teacher Chen," he said, "I promise you something. I promise that I will study harder than any student has ever studied. I promise that I will make you proud. And I promise that someday, when I am older and successful, I will come back to thank you properly." Mrs. Chen smiled through her tears. "I know you will do great things, Liu Wei. I have always known it. Now, go, before the bus leaves without you." Liu Wei climbed onto the bus and found a seat by the window. He pressed his face against the glass and waved at Mrs. Chen. The bus started to move, slowly at first, then faster as it headed toward the main highway. Mrs. Chen stood at the bus stop and watched until the bus disappeared around the mountain curve. Even after she could no longer see it, she continued to stand there, thinking about the boy she had helped raise. Other villagers had seen the bus leave and came to talk to Mrs. Chen. "You did a good thing," said Mrs. Zhang, an elderly woman who lived near the school. "That boy will remember your kindness forever." Mrs. Chen nodded but did not say much. She picked up the small bag she had brought and walked slowly back to her house. The village seemed quieter than usual, as if it too was missing Liu Wei. When Mrs. Chen arrived home, her husband was sitting at the kitchen table drinking tea. He looked at his wife and saw that she had been crying. "The boy is gone?" he asked. Quietly. "Yes," Mrs. Chen replied. "He is on his way to the city." Her husband was silent for a moment. Then he said something that surprised Mrs. Chen. "Maybe you were right to help him," he said. "Maybe he will do something important with his life." Mrs. Chen sat down across from her husband. "I hope so," she said. "I really hope so." That evening, Mrs. Chen went to the school and sat in her empty classroom. Liu Wei's desk was still there, but it looked lonely without him. She thought about all the lunches she had shared with him, all the after-school lessons, and all the dreams they had talked about. Mrs. Chen made a decision that night she would keep Liu Wei's desk exactly as it was. She would not let another student sit there. It would be a reminder of the boy who had changed her life as much as she had changed his. From that day forward, Mrs. Chen continued teaching her other students with the same dedication she had shown to Liu Wei. But every morning, she would look at that empty desk and remember the promise Liu Wei had made to her. She did not know if she would ever see him again. She did not know if he would remember her when he became successful. But she knew that she had done the right thing. She had given a hungry, orphan boy a chance at a better life. Years would pass before Mrs. Chen would learn just how important that chance had been. 23 years had passed since Liu Wei left the mountain village on that old bus. Mrs. Chen was now 68 years old. Her hair had turned completely white, and her back was bent from years of hard work. She had retired from teaching 2 years ago because her health was not good anymore. Mrs. Chen still lived in the same small house in Jiaoshan village. The house was older now, with cracks in the walls and a roof that leaked when it rained heavily. Her husband had died 5 years earlier from a heart attack. Now she lived alone, with only her memories to keep her company. Every morning, Mrs. Chen would sit by her window and look at the path that led to the old school. The school had been rebuilt with government money, and new teachers had come to replace the old ones. Sometimes Mrs. Chen would walk slowly to the school and look at the classroom where she used to teach. Liu Wei's old desk was still there, exactly as she had left it. Mrs. Chen often wondered what had happened to Liu Wei. In the first few years after he left, she had received letters from him. The letters told her about his life at the city school, his good grades, and his dreams for the future. But as time went on, the letters became less frequent. Eventually, they stopped coming altogether. Mrs. Chen understood why the letters had stopped. Liu Wei was growing up and building his own life. She did not expect him to remember an old village teacher forever. But sometimes, late at night, she would wonder if he was happy and successful. She would wonder if the sacrifice she had made had been worth it. Money was a constant worry for Mrs. Chen. Her teacher's pension was very small, only 800 yuans per month. This was barely enough to buy food and pay for basic needs. When she got sick, she could not afford to go to the doctor. In the town, she would buy cheap medicine from the village store and hope it would help. Mrs. Chen's own children had moved to cities to find work. Her son worked in a factory, and her daughter was a clerk in an office. They sent her a little money when they could, but they had their own families to support. Mrs. Chen did not want to be a burden to them, so she never asked for help. The village had changed a lot over the years. Many young people had left to find jobs in the cities. Only the elderly and some families with small children remained. The main road had been paved, and electricity had come to all the houses. But the village was still poor, and life was still difficult for most people. Mrs. Chen spent her days taking care of her small vegetable garden, cooking simple meals, and reading old books. Sometimes the new teachers at the school would visit her and ask about the old days. She would tell them stories about her students and the challenges of teaching in a poor village. But Mrs. Chen never talked about Liu Wei. That story was too personal and too precious to share with strangers. She kept it in her heart like a secret treasure. Meanwhile, far away in the big cities of China, Liu Wei had become someone completely different from the hungry orphan boy who had left the village. He was now 35 years old and one of the most successful businessmen in the country. After finishing middle school with top grades, Liu Wei had earned a scholarship to Beijing University, one of the best universities in China. He studied computer science and worked harder than any other student. He remembered Mrs. Chen's words about education being the key to a better life, and he never wasted a single day of learning. After university, Liu Wei got a job at a technology company in Shanghai. He was brilliant at solving problems and creating new software programs. Within a few years, he had been promoted to become a manager. But Liu Wei had bigger dreams than just being an employee. When Liu Wei was 28 years old, he started his own company. The company created educational software that helped children learn math, science, and languages on computers and phones. Liu Wei's idea was that every child, no matter how poor, should have access to good education through technology. The company grew very quickly. Schools all over China began using Liu Wei's educational software. The programs were so good that children learned faster and enjoyed studying more. International schools in other countries also started buying the software. Within 5 years, Liu Wei's company was worth billions of yuan. He had offices in Beijing, Shanghai, New York, and London. Magazines wrote articles about him, calling him a genius and a success story. He had more money than he could ever spend in his lifetime, but success had not changed the most important part of Liu Wei's character. He never forgot where he came from. In his office in Shanghai, he kept a photo of his old village school. He kept the letter that Mrs. Chen had written to him when he left the village. He had read that letter hundreds of times over the years. Liu Wei had tried many times to find Mrs. Chen. He had hired private investigators and used his company's resources to search for her. But the village was remote, and record-keeping in rural areas was not very good. For years, his searches had been unsuccessful. Then, 3 months ago, Liu Wei's investigators had finally found the information they needed. They discovered that Mrs. Chen was still alive and still living in Jiaoshan village. They learned about her poor health and difficult financial situation. When Liu Wei heard this news, he immediately canceled all his business meetings for the following week. He decided that he would return to the village to find Mrs. Chen. It was time to keep the promise he had made 23 years ago. Liu Wei spent days planning his return to the village. He wanted to do more than just say thank you to Mrs. Chen. He wanted to change her life in the same way she had changed his. He wanted to repay her kindness with something that would truly make a difference. First, Liu Wei contacted a construction company and ordered them to build a beautiful new house in the city, near the best hospital. The house would have everything Mrs. Chen needed: central heating, modern appliances, and a garden where she could grow flowers. Next, Liu Wei met with doctors and arranged for Mrs. Chen to have the best medical care available. He set up a special fund to pay for any treatment she might need, now or in the future. But Liu Wei's biggest plan was something that would honor Mrs. Chen's life work as a teacher. He decided to create a foundation that would help poor children all over China get better education. The foundation would be called the Chen Foundation in honor of his beloved teacher. Liu Wei planned to donate 1 billion yuan to start the foundation. The money would be used to build schools, provide meals for hungry children, and give scholarships to smart students from poor families. It would help thousands of children just like Liu Wei had been helped. As Liu Wei made these preparations, he thought about Mrs. Chen every day. He wondered if she would remember him. He wondered if she was proud of what he had accomplished. He wondered if she understood how much her kindness had meant to him. Liu Wei also thought about the other children who might be sitting hungry outside classrooms right now, just as he had been 23 years ago. He thought about teachers who might be struggling to help their students with limited resources. The Chen Foundation would make sure that many of these stories had happy endings. On a sunny October morning, Liu Wei got into his car and began the long drive to Zhaoshan village. He had not been back to the mountain region since the day he left on the old bus. As his car climbed the winding mountain roads, Liu Wei felt excited and nervous at the same time. He wondered if the village would look the same. He wondered if the old school building was still there. Most importantly, he wondered if Mrs. Chen would be happy to see him or if she would think he had forgotten about her for too many years. Liu Wei had become one of the richest and most powerful men in China. He had met presidents and prime ministers. He had given speeches to thousands of people, but he had never been as nervous as he was on this drive back to his childhood home. In a few hours, he would see Mrs. Chen again. In a few hours, he would be able to keep the promise he had made as a 12-year-old boy. In a few hours, he would begin to repay the debt he owed to the woman who had saved his life. Liu Wei did not know that Mrs. Chen still kept his empty desk in the old classroom. He did not know that she thought about him every morning when she looked toward the school. He did not know that she had never stopped believing in him, even after the letters stopped coming. But he was about to find out that some bonds are stronger than time and distance. He was about to discover that a teacher's love for her student can last a lifetime. And Mrs. Chen was about to learn that her small act of kindness had grown into something bigger than she had ever imagined possible. The mountain road stretched ahead of Liu Wei, leading him home to the woman who had given him everything when he had nothing. Soon, very soon, teacher and student would be reunited. The morning sun was just beginning to shine over Zhaoshan village when the sound of car engines broke the usual quiet. Mrs. Chen was in her small kitchen, making tea and wondering if she had enough rice for the week. She heard the noise outside but did not think much of it. Sometimes government officials came to the village in cars to check on road conditions or water supplies. But this was different. The sound grew louder and closer. Mrs. Chen walked slowly to her window and looked out. What she saw made her eyes grow wide with surprise. 3 shiny black cars were driving up the narrow dirt road toward her house. She had never seen such expensive cars in the village before. The cars stopped in front of Mrs. Chen's house. Several men in dark suits got out of the first and third cars. They looked around carefully, as if they were protecting someone important. Then the door of the middle car opened and a man stepped out. Mrs. Chen could not see the man's face clearly from her window, but something about him seemed familiar. He was tall and well dressed, wearing an expensive suit and leather shoes. He walked with confidence, but there was something gentle about the way he moved. The man said something to the men in suits, and they stepped back to give him space. Then he began walking alone toward Mrs. Chen's front door. As he got closer, Mrs. Chen's heart began to beat faster. There was something about his walk, something about the shape of his face, that reminded her of someone from long ago. The man stopped in front of her door and knocked gently. Mrs. Chen's hands were shaking as she walked to open it. When she pulled the door open, she found herself looking into the face of a successful, confident man in his 30s. But the eyes, those were the same eyes she remembered from a skinny 8-year-old boy. Mrs. Chen? The man said softly. Do you remember me? Mrs. Chen stared at him for a long moment. Her mind was trying to match the successful-looking man with the hungry child she had helped so many years ago. Then, suddenly, she knew. Liu Wei? She whispered. Is it really you? Yes, Teacher Chen, Liu Wei said, and his voice was thick with emotion. It is me, Mrs. Chen could not believe what she was seeing. The thin, ragged boy she had fed and taught had become the strong, well-dressed man. But his eyes were the same kind and intelligent, just as she remembered. Without thinking, Mrs. Chen reached out and touched Liu Wei's face, as if to make sure he was real. You grew so tall, she said, and tears began to flow down her cheeks. Liu Wei could not speak for a moment. Seeing Mrs. Chen again after all these years brought back all his memories of childhood. She looked so much older and smaller than he remembered, but her smile was exactly the same. Then Liu Wei did something that surprised Mrs. Chen. This successful businessman, who commanded meetings with hundreds of people, knelt down on the ground in front of her door. "Mrs. Chen," he said, "I have come back to thank you. Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to you. You saved my life when I was a hungry child. You gave me education when I had nothing. You believed in me when no one else did." Mrs. Chen was so shocked that she did not know what to say. She tried to pull Liu Wei to his feet. Stand up, she said. "You do not need to kneel to me. I am just an old village teacher." But Liu Wei stayed on his knees. "You are not just a teacher," he said. "You are the person who gave me life. You are the reason I am here today." By now, other villagers had heard about the cars and come to see what was happening. They gathered at a respectful distance, watching the strange scene. No one understood who this rich man was or why he was kneeling in front of Mrs. Chen. Finally, Liu Wei stood up, and Mrs. Chen invited him into her small house. As they walked inside, Liu Wei looked around at the simple furniture, the cracked walls, and the tiny kitchen. He felt sad to see that Mrs. Chen was still living in such poor conditions. They sat down at Mrs. Chen's small wooden table, the same table where she had eaten simple meals for decades. Mrs. Chen made tea with her old teapot and served it in her best cups, which were chipped and stained from years of use. "Tell me about your life," Mrs. Chen said. "I got your letters for a few years, but then they stopped. I always wondered what happened to you." Liu Wei felt ashamed that he had stopped writing. "I am sorry about the letters," he said. "As I got older and busier, thought you might not want to hear from me anymore. I thought you had your own life and family to worry about. I never stopped thinking about you," Mrs. Chen said simply. "Every morning when I walk past the school, I look at your old desk. I kept it empty all these years." This news made Liu Wei's eyes fill with tears. He could not believe that Mrs. Chen had kept his desk as a memory of him. "You kept my desk?" he asked. "Of course," Mrs. Chen said. "You were my most special student. I always hoped that someday you would come back to visit." Liu Wei reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. It was old and yellow, worn from being handled many times. "Do you remember this?" he asked. Mrs. Chen looked at the envelope and recognized her own handwriting. It was the letter she had written to Liu Wei before he left for the city school. "You kept my letter all these years?" she asked in amazement. "I have read it hundreds of times," Liu Wei said. "Whenever I felt lonely or discouraged, I would read your letter. It reminded me that someone believed in me. It reminded me to work hard and be kind to others." They talked for hours. Liu Wei told Mrs. Chen about his years in school, his time at university, and his successful business. He showed her pictures on his phone of his offices, his employees, and the educational software his company had created. Mrs. Chen listened with wonder and pride. She could hardly believe that the hungry boy she had helped had become such an important and successful person. "I always knew you were smart," she said, "but I never imagined you would become so successful. It all started with you," Liu Wei said. "If you had not given me food and education, I would have died in this village. Every success I have had is because of what you did for me." As the day went on, Liu Wei began to explain why he had really come back. "Mrs. Chen," he said, "I want to repay your kindness. I want to take care of you the way you took care of me." He told her about the beautiful house he had built for her in the city, near the best hospitals and doctors. He explained that she would never have to worry about money again, that he would make sure she had everything she needed for the rest of her life. Mrs. Chen was overwhelmed by Liu Wei's generosity, but she was also confused. "I do not need a big house," she said. "I am happy here in the village. This has been my home for my whole life." Liu Wei understood her feelings, but he also knew that Mrs. Chen needed better medical care than she could get in the village. "Please," he said, "let me take care of you. You can visit the village whenever you want, but you need to be near good doctors. I want you to be healthy and comfortable." After much discussion, Mrs. Chen agreed to move to the city house. She realized that Liu Wei was right, her health was not good, and she needed better medical care. Besides, she could see how important this was to Liu Wei. He needed to feel that he was taking care of her, just as she had taken care of him. But Liu Wei had an even bigger surprise. That evening, he called a meeting in the village square. All the villagers came to see what this mysterious rich man wanted to tell them. Liu Wei stood in front of the crowd and introduced himself. "My name is Liu Wei," he said. 23 years ago, I was an orphan boy in this village. I was hungry and had no hope for the future. Mrs. Chen, your teacher, saved my life by giving me food and education." The villagers listened in amazement. Many of them remembered the thin orphan boy, but they could not believe he had become the successful businessman. "Today," Liu Wei continued, "I want to announce the creation of the Chen Foundation. This foundation will be dedicated to helping poor children all over China get the education they deserve. It will provide meals for hungry students, build schools in remote areas, and give scholarships to bright children from poor families." Liu Wei paused and looked at Mrs. Chen, who was sitting in the front row with tears streaming down her face. "I am donating 1 billion yuan to start this foundation," Liu Wei said. "But more than that, I am dedicating my life to making sure that no child goes hungry in a classroom. I am making sure that teachers like Mrs. Chen have the resources they need to help their students." The crowd was silent for a moment, trying to understand the enormity of what Liu Wei had just announced. Then they began to clap. The applause grew louder and louder until the whole village was cheering. Mrs. Chen could not stop crying. She had never imagined that her simple act of sharing lunch with the hungry boy would lead to something so big. Thousands of children would now have better lives because of what she had done for one child. That night, Liu Wei and Mrs. Chen sat together in her small house one last time. Tomorrow, they would leave for the city, where Mrs. Chen would start her new life in comfort and safety. "I still cannot believe this is real," Mrs. Chen said. "When I gave you food all those years ago, I was just trying to help one hungry child. I never thought it would lead to anything like this." "That is exactly why it led to this," Liu Wei said. "You helped me because it was the right thing to do, not because you expected anything in return. That kind of pure kindness is rare in the world. It deserves to be honored and multiplied."